Go ahead and get all of your units together and ready to lay out into your block. We've got the two sets of snowball corner blocks, our flying geese, and then our other cuts. We have the little rectangles, our center square, and then the squares for setting inside the block as well. Now the way that the block is intended to be laid out is to have two of the snowball blocks that are the same color together, with these corners laid out to be on the inside of the block. So I like to lay out the block entirely before I start assembling it, just to make sure everything looks the way I like. And then on the outside corners we've got two of the larger squares. And then in the next row, so these two that match that will go on the opposite side on the bottom. And then this one, which is one of the pieces for the snowball corner for the of the other color, will go at the side. So let me adjust these just so I can fit everything in the screen for you. Okay, so we'll just make little adjustments. Again, it's just so you can see it all. And then these little corners or squares will go here, and one will go here, and the other two matching those go on the other side. And remember that these two corners match on the inside of the flower. Now let's place what goes in here. First, our little flying geese, it matches with the background up here. And then we have a little rectangle that goes there. And then our flying geese will kind of move around and go in those same spots on the sides, with a rectangle going there as well. And then this piece goes right in the middle. So we'll fill in down here at the bottom with the same pieces. So since this block does have all different sizes of pieces, lay it out before you start assembling it, just so you know what parts go where and how they all work together. So we'll put these guys together here. Okay. And then our last little flying geese will fit here, and then the rectangle will fit there. So now that it's all laid out, let's go over how it's actually assembled. So to build this block, it essentially goes together in rows, but to start out the rows, we need to piece the flying geese to one of the rectangles. And we're going to repeat that for all four. Now, what you can do, if you're noticing already that this is a row, you can piece the flying geese, a rectangle, the center, add a rectangle, and a flying geese, and have a complete row. That's the only row that you can do that with. Up here and down here, you have to piece these two and piece these two before adding on the corners. So just choose the method that you want to go with for your assembly. To start with, it might be just easier to do all four of the same things at the same time. But if you want to go ahead and do that whole row, you certainly can. I'm going to show doing all four of these things at the same time. So we'll assemble this row and this row and this row. So 1, 2, 3 center rows. And then after we assemble those 3 rows, we will put those 3 rows together and we'll have a little center block, which is very cute in and of itself. To add it to the rest of the block, we have to sew these petals together to get a full row here. So we will assemble these two, and then we'll have this unit, our center, and this unit to sew together in one big center row. And then all 4 of these will be pieced together in one row, and all 4 of these will be pieced together in one row. And then the final assembly to put everything together will be the top row, this large center row, and the bottom row, and your block will be done. Now there are places that will have seams that spin. You can probably see them already, any place where 4 seams come together. So here is an intersecting seam, and here is an intersecting seam, and here are intersecting seams. These seams bump right into the flying geese here. They don't intersect. So you don't need to stop and start at the 1/4 inch. Sometimes I do just out of habit and just to be consistent as I'm piecing. That way I don't have to think about what does and what doesn't. I just sew them all that way. But that is certainly up to you. If you keep in mind what needs to be intersected and spun and what doesn't, you can stop and start at those 1/4 inches as needed. The other intersections are here and here. So intersection, intersection, here and here, where they spin. And the other places they won't spin as much as we would like them to. That's what happens when you have 2 seams together that bump up against a piece that doesn't have a seam. So that will happen in sashings as well as anytime you have a pieced piece coming together with a non-pieced piece. So I hope that helps out as we start to assemble this. Of course, there will be an assembly diagram in the instructions as well to help you along. And anytime you have questions or need anything, please go ahead and post a comment or head over to the Facebook group and I will help you there. So to get started, I'm going to stack my rows. So this top row will all be pieced together as well as this bottom row. There's nothing extra we need to do. That's easy. So I'm going to put those aside. These will be pieced together as well along that seam. So I'm going to just actually stack those with right sides together so I remember. And same over here, I'm going to stack those with right sides together so I remember and put them off to the sides. Now I'm going to kind of just pull these corners out of the way so we know where they go. And I'm going to go ahead and glue baste these units together and sew them. And after these are sewn, we'll start assembling the full center. So to get started on that, these are another great little thing that you can do the chain glue basting with if you get them all arranged on your pressing surface. And you get your glue. Doesn't matter which side the glue goes on as far as, which piece. But I'll just do a line of glue on the flying geese. And do make sure that you are gluing this to the sky side and not the geese side. That's an easy mistake to make. So I'm just aligning those pieces right sides together. Right sides together. And then we'll just heat set all of them. And then they'll be ready to sew. None of the seams here are going to intersect anything, so when I piece these, I'm just going to go straight from one end to the other without stopping or starting. There's no need to at all. And then they will be ready to go. You can go ahead and glue baste these rows together as well, the top and bottom. So keep them in the same orientation that they were when you aligned them and arrange them with your block. And we're going to go ahead and draw that line of glue and right sides together. So I just flip that piece over to the right side and align it to match. Okay, and then heat set that, and then you'll do the same thing over here to match those up. And we want these seams to align. They're going to just they're going to align right on top of each other, these two seams, so that they intersect. Unfortunately, they don't nest. That would be nice, but that's okay. They don't need to. If they're right on top of each other, they're not too bulky, then it'll be just fine. Then heat set that. Then when you open it up, you'll be able to see that they align really nicely and they won't shift at your machine, which helps match that corner up that we were trying to match so nicely. So line that corner. And then heat set that, and this row is ready to go. You can do the same thing with the bottom row as well, and you can piece that together, and it's just an easy, quick thing to be able to do while you're working on something else as well. Or you can wait and do it later along with the rest of the edge pieces. So next up, we'll start working on that full centerpiece, and I'll walk you through piecing the rest of this block together. Now that these are sewn, we can press them to the side. I do want to point out when I was sewing them, and I did sew with a scant 1/4 inch, I wanted to make sure that the seam intersected the intersection of the sky on the flying geese. That way I have a nice point right there that isn't cut off. So I'll set the seams. And then for pressing these, we are going to press to the side. It's so much easier to do that than try and press that bulky end of the geese over. So just press that over to the side. Remember that we don't have any intersecting seams on this one, so we can press all of these in the same direction. And then we'll be ready to put these together with the center portion. So we'll lay that out again. These pretty much go something like this with that center square here. So let me lay them out so you can see them a little bit nicer. And then we need the little squares. They go in these corners here. And then we are going to piece this together in as if it were just a simple 9 patch, which basically it is. We're just going to add out on all 4 sides the petals that go with the fire flower. So we'll start here. You can start top or bottom, whatever you prefer. So we'll glue base these rows together. It is my preference to glue base a whole row, but if you prefer to just do the first 2 parts of each row, you certainly can. So I'm going to align that, heat set it, then put some glue right here, and then align this one, and heat set it, and then that whole row is ready to sew. When I sew this row together, I am going to stop and start at the 1/4 inch because this intersection and this intersection do nest and spin. So I am going to be careful with that. So I'll put this to the side and we'll work on this row next. And that row is ready to piece together, and then the last little row here. So I'll piece these just like you've seen in the previous videos. I'll come back after it's sewn, or the next time you see these, they'll be sewn. And then we'll put them together with the main blocks as well. So before heading over to my machine, I want to show, if you lay them out just like this, you'll be able to see that everything is the way that it needs to be, oriented in the proper direction and ready to go. With our rows sewn, we'll go ahead and press the seams in alternating directions, and then we'll join the rows and we will have the center all ready to piece into the main block. So let's move these out of the way. All right, so I'm setting the seams just to help prevent any ripples in there. And these kind of naturally want to fall in alternating right and left. So I'm just going to go with it. Let's see, to the right and to the left. And then for the middle row, I'll set my seam. And I'm going to make it go left and right. So I'll flip that one around. So now this one will nest just like that. And then again, this one kind of just wants to go that way. So I will just let it a little bit easier. And then our rows are ready to come together and make this cute little block, which would actually be a really great accent block if we needed another one. So I'll glue base these rows together. We'll put 2 rows together, sew, and then put the final row together. These rows do bump up against the block, but they don't intersect anything, so you can just sew directly from end to end on both of those seams. So let's go ahead and nest that together. Just do your line glue. And then start from the center out. Even on small things, I like to start from the center out just to make sure I get my accuracy, get those seams nested. And then heat set, and you're ready to piece that row together, those 2 rows, and then we'll join that final row, and we're getting closer and closer to this block being done. Well, the seam is done. I just went straight through, nothing fancy, all the way through from end to end with a scant 1/4 inch, just keeping that seam consistent. So I'll just press that, and then this intersection will spin, so we'll just kind of remove any glue that might be holding them together. And then, just like in the past, kind of squish down that intersection, give it a little bossing. And then, well, from the front, which is my preference, we'll just press those seams in the directions, the opposite directions that they need to go. So you can see it goes right down, left up, right down, left up, left down, right up. So just in those opposite directions. And of course in the pattern I'll have arrows to show you where they need to go. And then we will, based on that last row for the center, and then we can get working on assembling the entire full block. So from the center out, nest those 2 seams so they match all the way out to the corners and edges. And corners and edges, make sure they all match. Heat set it, and it's ready to sew. And it's sewn. It's like magic. Let's set the seam, and we'll open up those intersections. Give them a little bossing with your iron. And from the front, press them to the sides. I sure hope you guys are finding that this pressing seams thing and doing alternating, pressing in alternating directions is helpful for you. I really like it. I think it looks fantastic. And I hope that you're finding the results also make you really happy too. Let's go ahead and lay out the rest of those blocks. Remember earlier I glue basted that top row like that there. So that row's already ready to go. So I'm just going to kind of put him out of the way. And then our side ones, these go on the side here, and these here. So we want these corners to match when we piece them together. And then last but not least, this bottom row, just the same as the top row. We'll glue base all of this together and get it sewn. We'll glue base these together, and then we'll have 3 main rows, and then the top that's peeking out up here to put together. So let me glue base this one real quick. These out of the way. As I put this up here like this for a second, I freaked out and said, oh no, that needs to be down here in the middle. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Because if I flip this around to have those here, it's going to be the same block. It was just because it was on the bottom. My perception went askew for a minute. So over here, we'll just match those corners again. Heat set. Fold that one over a little bit. Line it and heat set it. And match these 2 seams. Just make sure they're landing right on top of each other. And if you're glue basted there, that is going to keep it from shifting. What you can also do, if you find that this is off a bit, but you have a little forgiveness on the top or bottom, you could shift it down to match these, and then just know that one at the top, one of these edges is off a smidge if you want to. Because since it's in the seam allowance, it'll be absorbed. Nobody will ever know, and then your little parts will match real nice. But that I will leave up to you. Okay, so there we go. So those are all set. I've got those 2 main rows ready to piece together, and now my side flower petals. You just need to make sure, whether it's like this or like this, just make sure that these come together. Do a line of glue and match. Make sure it lands on top of the corresponding corner, and then heat set it. And then you can see that it will piece together real nice. And the last one, and then we'll sew these, and then we will press them and get them put together with the center to make the full block. Okay, these are all ready to sew. These are sewn and ready to press. I want to have you take a look at what I did here on the edge seam. So out here where the larger square mat meets up with the little petals, I did stop at that 1/4 inch mark for the part that will be intersecting with the center portion of the block. I didn't stop and start at the edge. You can, and if you did, no worries. I just chose not to. And then the center seam doesn't intersect anything, so I just sewed straight through that one. So on these, I did stop, and then I realized, oh, I didn't really need to, but it's not a big deal one way or the other. It's kind of one of those, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I don't need it, but I have it, so it's fine. But if I needed it and didn't have it, then I'd have to unpick, and it would take a little bit more time and effort to fix that. So let's go ahead and press these seams. I'll just set them real quick. And we'll do the same for these. The first ones that we are going to need are these 2. These attach to the sides of the center of our block. So let's pull the center up here so you can see how it all comes together. So this one will go here, and this one will go here, and then the other 2 rows that we have, one will go on top and one will go on bottom. So when we press these 2 seams, it doesn't matter if they go right, left, because they just bump up against this flying geese. So you can press them whichever direction you kind of feel like they want to go. Okay, and then we'll join them to the center, and then we'll add those final 2 rows and it'll be finished. So I'm going to go ahead and, based on this this side here, and I'm going to match up these corners. And when I'm doing that, I want to point something out to you. Some of you who are very observant may have noticed while watching the video that one of my flying geese kind of ended up being big. It's just peeking out on those edges. I may have forgotten to trim it or something, who knows. But what I have kind of done is compensated for it. I have not matched any of my seams to it because I knew it was not correct. So what I'm doing, instead of trying to align this seam to, or this fabric, these 2 blocks to that edge, I am making sure they align out here to these corners. So you can kind of see there, and then that's just going to get absorbed in the seam allowance. It really doesn't matter. I don't have to go back and make a big fuss about trimming it, making sure it's accurate. I know that out here, these are accurate, and these are really what is more important than this piece. It's just going to be right in the right inside of the seam allowance, and it won't make a difference. So I'll just heat set that, and it's ready to sew. And I can do the same to this side. It looks like I did the same thing on that little flying geese too. Make sure that the join here goes by the flying geese. Okay, it's really easy to do this, and then it'll be backwards, which could be an intentional design element if you like, but set that, and now it's ready to sew. And when I open that up, just to double check, that's a good way to make sure that you have oriented these properly. If you open it up and you notice that this part of it is facing here, then just unglue it, peel it off, and re-glue it, and you can have it put in place properly. So next up, I will sew these 2 seams. These do intersect here and here with the row above and the row below. So do stop and start at the 1/4 inch on both ends, and then we'll add on the top row and the bottom row, and then the block is done. These 2 seams are complete. I've started and stopped at the 1/4 inch for both. And so I'll just set the seam, and then it's going to all get pressed in the same direction. And I'm choosing to press this one out and pressing this one out. So what I'm doing here is treating the seams of these 2 blocks where they join as one long seam, rather than alternating on the back, and then having to do something with this little part. I am treating it as one rectangle. And now we are ready to press and attach this seam. So having done that, these are ready to press in the directions opposite of what I did with these 2. So this one is going to the right and left. So this one's going to go to the left, and this one will go to the right. And really this middle one, it does not matter where it goes because it bumps up to that one. So you can decide on that. So we'll go ahead and press that. Maybe I'll just continue pressing that one in that direction, and then I'll press this one. Just being a righty, sometimes flipping it around just helps me. And then we will join that one just like that. So I'll press the other one in the same way. And again, this one's going to go the opposite direction of the seam it's going to join. So now these are ready to join on the top and bottom of the block, and we'll complete our block. So to do that, I'm going to draw a line of glue right along the top here, Okay. And then I'm going to make sure when I do that, that the little triangle of white is by the flying geese, and I'm going to nest those seams that will intersect first. Remember, this one doesn't, it's just going to land where it lands. It's not intersecting. And then match those up, and then heat set it. And just for good measure, I might as well do the other side while I'm at it. And then I have both rows ready to go. So same deal on this side. Sometimes I get a little piece of fuzz on the tip of my glue, and then it makes the glue drag funny. So just clean that up every once in a while. Okay, again, with the white triangle facing that flying geese, nest those seams here, match your corners here at the ends. Match those seams, make sure they're all where they're supposed to be, and then match your corners. Kind of tap them in place, make sure you're happy with all the alignment, and then heat set. Now both of your final seams are ready to sew, and then your block will be complete. The final two seams are sewn. I went directly from end to end on both. I did back stitch a couple of stitches just for good measure. I'll press those seams just to set that seam and prevent those little ripples. And remember, those seams here do intersect, so we'll open that up and open up that one. And then if you need to, kind of just push it down with your iron. I'm going to do the same for the other side as well while we're at it. There we go. Okay, and then from the front, we're going to alternate the pressing direction. So let's take a look at the back again. Okay, so this seam, these two blocks here, I've treated this seam where both of them have a part in as one long seam, so I'm pressing it all in the same direction. And then these two seams will alternate going in the opposite direction of that one seam there. So we can press that, and then that will go that direction. All right. Now it's a little trickier here. This is pretty bulky right here. So there's a couple of things you can do to cut down on this bulk. You could just press it and be okay with it being a little thicker. You can grade your seam. So on this part that's thicker, that will be underneath. You can take your scissors and kind of grade the seam and thin it out. That way when you press it down, it won't be as thick. You can do it for that little point right there too. So when I'm grading it, this part is shorter than that part, so it kind of goes in steps. Short, like short, shortest. So you can do that on the other side as well if you're going to grade it. The other option, so it makes a good amount of difference. Another option would be to clip it on both sides and press that up. But you don't have to. I kind of, if you really want to do that, you can. Just know that it's an option. It's a great option for other bulky seams as well. But it's not terrible, and you can do that. The last option. Let me show you the very last option, which might be, oops, look what I did here. Okay, this is kind of a good little teachable moment. See how the corner there flipped over when I was piecing it. So I'm going to go ahead and just clip right along my seam, but not the thread. I'm not doing anything to the thread. I'm just pulling out my fabric, and then I'll just press it in the direction it was supposed to go, and now it's all fine. Okay, no worries. The last thing, going back to these bulkier seams, the last thing you can do is clip next to that intersected seam. But don't clip your threads, just clip right up to it. Again, these things are all optional. And then you just press that up, and you can press that whole seam up. I kind of feel like that's the best option if you don't like the bulky seam. So I wanted to give you all three options: to grade the seam, like I did here, to clip on the edges of that flying geese, which you certainly can do, or finally just clip next to that intersected seam and then push it forward. Now, what I would not recommend doing is just pushing it. You can just push this whole seam that way, but then you get that bulky part here from not intersecting or not spinning the seam. So spin that seam, then clip, and you can press in the opposite direction. Or you just keep it the way that it was intended to go. I know, lots of options. Sometimes too many choices, but I feel like it's good for you to know that there's other things you can do. So from the front, I'm going to press that. Once you've got it all pressed, your block is complete and all ready to be pieced into your quilt. I love this little block. I hope you do too. It's a fun one, and it sure does challenge you a little bit. I hope that you have learned a few extra tips and tricks and skills that will enhance your piecing and making of other projects that you love and enjoy. In addition to Fireflower, this month's block of the month includes an Ohio Star block, as well as an appliqued Shadow Blossom block. So stay tuned for the video that will walk you through making the Shadow Blossom block, and please use the previous videos for making your Ohio Star.